Afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing? I know I can see some faces, some friendly faces in the room. I'm from Dell Technologies. You're all expecting that I'm going to pitch a Dell laptop right now, aren't you? I can tell. You're getting excited. I can feel it. But the truth is, I'm not here to talk about Dell Technologies or laptops. I am going to try and talk about resilience and some of the conversations that we're having in the marketplace right now about true resilience. So the time is now in terms of cybersecurity and the pace of attacks. And so I'm just going to go through and kind of walk you through some of the highlights, some of the lowlights of some of the conversations we're having with some leading organizations right now around resilience, but particularly on cyber resilience. So I think first thing to point out is we're always on. McKinsey have kind of coined this expression about always on. The sources of disruption are multiplying. And just as a general stat, how many of you think in terms of IoT devices, personal IoT devices that you may have by the year 2020? So the average amount of personal IoT devices a person may have. So I'd be keen just to get some ideas around the numbers. So right now, it's between 4 and 6 devices that most individuals will have. But by 2020, what do you think might be the number that you might have? And I do not want to pick on some of my Dell friends in the room, so I'm going to pick on some of my banking friends. How many? None. Okay, that's interesting. I think it might be a bit more than none. So the average is 4 right now. Okay, think about the rise of Alexa, Nest. Anything over here, guys? 20. Yep, so at 20 it is. So on average, we're going to see 20 personal devices for IoT by the year 2020. So increasing uses of devices, right? So added levels of complexity and average rising levels of exposure more than anything else. So with that, complexity at scale, right? We have an IoT device outside. It's a Formula One racing car. It's connected with all kinds of IoT devices. We are seeing much greater levels of complexity being built into systems and networks. With that alongside it comes much greater levels of unpredictability, right? And much greater levels of threats. So this level of exposure is increasing all the time as we connect more and more using 5G technology. So I want this to be hopeful. I want this to be a positive discussion rather than trying to scare you all. But there are encouraging and rising threats in the landscape at the moment. So one of the themes that I took out of it, and I have to credit Laurent for this, because I had a quick chat with Laurent Friday afternoon, and he prompted me to read a book over the weekend, which I did, which was called Team of Themes. Great book. I don't know if many of you have read it, by General Crystal Stanley. Essentially laying out battlefield and warfield strategic tactics around warfare in Iraq. But he really positioned the point around resilience, and he now lectures in MIT on resilience and cybersecurity alongside having his own business. But he outlined a couple of key paradigm shifts in the marketplace right now, particularly from the 20th century right through to the 21st. But they're subtle but very important. And the first is that we have been in a predictable age of standardization, of protocols, and we're now moving into a time of major unpredictability, right? The second element of it was moving from a time of having complicated structures to being highly, highly complex, and that is hard to navigate around and hard to break down. The third one was really touching on robustness. And I think as a business, certainly Dell, we've prided ourselves on being a robust organization. But actually, it's not robustness that's going to get us through right now. It's about building resilience. And they're very different models, they're very different characteristics. So flood protection systems are very robust, but they're not often resilient. And actually, one costs the other at times. We're also seeing a significant shift right now in discussions that we have with major clients around how they're structuring their cybersecurity teams, how they're structuring risk resilience in their organization. And so moving from a command-led structure right through to being more autonomous and spreading that risk and that awareness right across the organization so that every leader is responsible for some level of resilience. The last two, I think, are pretty obvious, but we're seeing businesses moving from being much more structured than what they used to being much more agile, and agility moving with pace and being able to respond to incidents. And then last but not least, moving from an efficient model to sustained adaptability. So this has really kind of thrown up significant changes. And I think you all thought I was going to talk about laptops. But the truth is, we are seeing significant shifts right now in the discussions that we're having on cybersecurity and cyber resilience. And they're not about the technology. They are all about the organization. So We are seeing significant movement around spend as well in terms of security spend and technology spend. So up until now, we've seen a lot more spend around identity, protect, detect. And actually, we're seeing a bit of movement back into the areas of respond and recover. So since 2014, since the Sony attack, we've actually seen a greater awareness being built around respond and recover. However, it's not enough. Right? There's still a bit of an imbalance here where we're seeing proactive measures being taken and less discussion happening about actual recovery in the event of an attack. And the truth is, it's not going to be in the event, it will be when an attack happens. So we're trying to really prompt the awareness about resilience and trying to understand how can businesses get a better insight into building this resilience layer right across their organization and not just within their security functions. I think this just touches on two major attacks. Most of you will be aware of it. I think our friends in Wired did a great job recently of writing a paper on the NotPetya attack with Maersk in 2017. Sony Pictures was hit in 2014 by the movie that they put out, The Interview, by the Koreans. Essentially, both nation-state attacks, both significant attacks at the time. I think the one that scared us most was the Sony Pictures one because it was a black swan event. The aim of that was destruction as the goal, right? And that has reshaped the discussion right now about resilience for most organizations. Maersk was not the only ones that were hit at the time by the NotPetya attack. There was many other leading organizations. I'm sure there's a few of you in the room today that were impacted by that attack. But both of these have really shaped how we look at organizational resilience and how we look at cyber resilience as well. So considerable attacks on them. I'm going to play a short video by our friends in Hiscox at the moment that they put out a while ago just to try and really drive that point around resilience. So I think that should come up now.
Another shot.
Has that been open the whole time?
Look at the bee and the bike on a logo.
Seen the other side of the road?
Oh, is that my twin? Oh, it's a fake Brompton.
It's exactly the same.
What the hell?
I've had people walking past and like, what are two Brompton stores doing right opposite each other?
So weird.
Like, I feel like I'm in some parallel universe.
That's a couple who are just in here, right?
Yeah.
They bought a bike.
They walked in from here.
And then they went over
straight.
there.
Type in their website.
I'm really confused.
Go walk over there.
We just wondered what was going on. He was like, do you want to test out one of our bikes? No. They've got the same tags as us.
They're having those of Bromptons delivered into their shop.
What?
What's happening?
I think these are our...
Delivery, diff 146.
You sure this isn't delivery for over on the inside of the road?
Thrompton. No, it's here, mate.
Are you Brompton?
No, Thrompton.
No, I can't even do it. What the hell? All right, we've got customers.
Hold on.
Hi, guys.
Price are in a Brompton. How many parts? How many parts?
£840. Super real leather. Bigger tyres.
Give us a demonstration.
There's a couple of different methods.
Sorry, just 1 second, sir.
How many parts? Sorry. Actually, yes, stand back a second. Componentry, materials.
Gary, what's the smallest size?
If you don't want the mud guards, take them off.
See you later. Bye-bye. See ya.
What was that?
The guy said, tell me your favourite 3 things about the tyre.
What the hell is going on?
You're getting closed down.
Really? What should we do?
Oh, whoa.
What are you doing? Can you take the sign down, please?
This is not okay.
The fact that you don't know what to do in that situation, it's daunting, really.
It's one thing if you see it online, but as you see it right in front of you, it kind of really brings it home that this is happening probably everywhere with every brand.
I was in so much shock, I was just going to take my T-shirt off and just walk out. I was like, what is going on? Like,
To see the company that you work for being undermined like that kind of really makes it real.
Every hack in this film is based on real criminal methods. If you fall victim, Hiscox will get you back up and running fast. Hiscox, experts in small business insurance.
That was a pretty effective short campaign by Hiscox. Like, I have to give it to them. It was really effective. But they're right. Attacks are happening all the time and at a pace that we can't keep up with. So we really just wanted to drive the point home about resilience. because we are really seeing a lack of discussion at senior levels in our organizations that we talk to about resilience right now. Typically, it's been isolated to chief security officers, chief risk officers, maybe CIOs, but the truth is resilience resides with every team leader and every manager that needs to take ownership and accountability for driving resilience in the organization. So when we talk about resilience, what do we mean? Really simple expression, which is to bounce back, or the ability to recover in the event of any kind of adversity or change. For us within cyber resilience, about catastrophic attacks. But we are seeing this increase in these levels of attacks and an increase in the level of unpredictability about them. So with that in mind, we've kind of really thought through what are the elements of resilience and what really do we need to consider about building organization resilience in an organization and across a business. And the first one is, no surprise, organizational readiness. The second one is business model change, and we're seeing lots of this happening, particularly within financial institutions and the banks that Ed just mentioned earlier on. And the last but not least is the technology advancement where Dell really plays. So the first one is around organizational constructs. And I touched on this when I mentioned the book that I read over the weekend. Thanks again to Laurent for that. Where we're seeing a bit of a reshaping around resilience and security functions. And this is supported by LinkedIn and some of the data they're seeing as well. So we're seeing more and more functions setting up to be resilience functions, heads of backup, heads of cyber resilience, heads of risk, but new teams and organizational constructs being set up around it. So traditionally, we had a command and control model, and now what we're seeing is this movement towards autonomous teams with a shared sense of purpose and a shared commitment and shared goal. And actually, this movement towards these new kind of organizational constructs of understanding what to do in the event of attack is really, really important. So I think this is one of the design principles that's coming through for resilience. The second one is about business model change. And I know many of you come from some of the leading banks, and you're part of these organizations where you're building out skeleton models, right? In the event of attack, that you've got a business model that can pick it up and run with it outside of being attacked. So we're seeing the creation of new business models coming through because of resilience factors and because of considerations around an attack. And that's a healthy approach to take. Adaptability is being built in, core to the business, and we're seeing this rise essentially of new changes coming through with some of the leading banks and financial institutions and insurance companies. We're also seeing it with some of the TMT sectors, so some of the telco, media and entertainment clients actually looking at building out skeleton business models to replicate the business when an attack happens so they can continue to serve customers. One example of a client that's working really well building in this resilience level is Netflix. So the work that they're doing with chaos engineering is a really effective tool and really effective approach to build in essentially a protocol for their technology functions. So they've set out chaos engineering across their business, and they really just try and build in that redundancy layer within their servers to really drive and test out how ready the business is at any time to continue to serve customers when it's been attacked. So this kind of simple mechanisms of building it in and building an additional construct of a business model behind the scenes is a simple way but effective way of building resilience through. And then last but not least, we are seeing significant change happening around the technology on this. So with that in mind, we're seeing some of the older methods that are still very important and still have very relevant roles to play in terms of how they support an organization in the event of attack. But we're also seeing advancements around the creation of data vaults. And that's important. It really is to understand what do you do to safeguard your critical data in the event of an attack. Now, we're going to delve deeper into this in a workshop at 3 o'clock upstairs in the Battle Bridge room. So I'm not going to go into how the technology works, why it's been set up, but essentially this technology solution was co-created with a number of our clients, banking clients, to really create a separate data vault for their critical assets. So we're seeing lots of movement at the moment around resilience. It's not on the technology, it really is on a much wider element around organizational readiness and change and around business model change as well. One thing that we are coming back to all the time in these discussions about resilience is that moral compass. And we're actually finding that those organizations that are building this resilience layer in have a shared sense of understanding. They have a shared sense of understanding of the risks and the cyber threat. They also have a very clear understanding of their organization's purpose. And those are the organizations that are coming through to be the most resilient right now. So that is actually quite important. It's a distinct differentiator that we're seeing in the discussions we're having with organizations as they get ready, is those organizations that are really clear on their purpose and really clear on their cyber attacks and threats are the ones that are most prepared. So through all of this, we've really kind of, through the discussions and the insights that we're having with clients, we've kind of come up with 5 major steps to building this resilience. They're much more organizational and strategic than talking about the product. Essentially, the first one is about building executive level awareness. And this sounds much easier than it is. Trying to sit down with senior leaders and explain the threat landscape is actually a pretty difficult thing. We're finding that a lot of CISOs at the moment and chief risk officers, this discussion is being held with them rather than with other wider C-suite leaders. And actually, the whole organization needs to get across this. So one simple mechanism around that is actually running scenario-based planning, running simulations with leadership teams to actually test out how does a leadership team respond and who is accountable in the event of an attack. The second area is on agile risk management. It sounds pretty obvious, and it is pretty obvious, but again, a lot of organizations are really kind of struggling to put this in place, despite what Ed touched on around GDPR and recent regulation. The third, I guess, is really protecting your critical data. And that is not all of your data, but your most critical data, and identifying what that critical data is. And we often see that it's between 10 and 15% of your full data set should be protected and be put into somewhere secure. The next one then is really around aligning the processes, right? So many of you as leading organizations have large amounts of suppliers, you've got contractors, you may have part-time employees, you're working as part of an ecosystem. And so that spreads the bets in terms of exposure levels as well. So making sure that whole contractor pool, that supplier base, understands what's needed to make sure your business is fully protected and ready for that attack or an event of an attack is really important. So aligning those processes and getting the governance model in place. And then last but not least, I really would recommend all of you to consider the Netflix approach about test and retest and building in that redundancy layer as well. Scenario planning is a great way to do it, not just within the IT function, but right across the organization, in your supply chain business, in your logistics business, in your customer services business, to really just build in how would you respond in the event of attack. So we're going to delve deeper into this, and I know the time is ticking, and I know Laurent's up on stage, so I've got to end it. And I know it's a fascinating subject. We are going to discuss resilience. We're going to do a bit of simulations. We're going to work this through about the lessons that we've seen working with the likes of Sony and Maersk, and hopefully we'll share some further insights in the workshop. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, Margarete. I switch microphones.